Before we begin this story, please do something for us. Comment below with your location. We truly love knowing where you're watching from. And if you are new here, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the powerful stories we share. Now, let's start. The morning that changed Maria Dawson's life began like any other, quiet, cold, and painfully ordinary. She woke up before sunrise, as she always did, tying her dark hair into a simple bun and slipping into the plain uniform she wore every day. Maria had worked for the Sullivan family for 2 years. Billionaire businessman Edward Sullivan, admired across the country, and his teenage son, Noah Sullivan, lived in a mansion that looked perfect from the outside but felt strangely hollow inside. Maria was a housemaid, one of the few people still working there after Edward dismissed almost everyone following a recent scandal in his company. But even after losing staff, he trusted Maria. She'd never been late, never raised her voice, never broken anything, never talked back. She worked quietly, respectfully, and without trying to be seen. She never expected her loyalty to become the doorway to a nightmare. Maria moved through the mansion like a shadow, sweeping the marble hallway, polishing glass tables, arranging curtains so the early sunlight entered just right. Unlike the other staff who had worked there before, Maria didn't gossip, didn't ask questions, and didn't wander around rooms she had no business being in. That was why Edward trusted her. And maybe that trust was why she was the perfect target. Noah, the billionaire's 16-year-old son, was the opposite of his father. He was quiet, observant, and rarely smiled. While Edward surrounded himself with power, noise, and influence, Noah lived mostly in silence. He spent hours in the mansion library, reading books his father never touched. He noticed things his father never saw. And he noticed Maria. Not in a romantic way. Noah simply recognized her kindness. She was the only person who spoke to him gently, who asked if he had eaten, who placed an extra blanket on his couch when he fell asleep reading. She was the one soft thing in a house dominated by cold luxury. But that morning, Noah didn't come downstairs. Not for breakfast. Not for water. Not even when Maria knocked gently on his door. That was unusual. And it was the first sign that something was terribly wrong. At exactly 10 a.m., a black sedan rolled into the driveway. The engine purred softly, but the aura it carried was loud. When the door opened, a tall man stepped out wearing a black suit that looked tailored to perfection. His face was sharp, calculating, unreadable. This was Judge Harold Benton, one of the most feared judges in the entire state, a man known for his no-mercy rulings, a man who prided himself on being the guardian of justice. But behind that polished smile was something darker, something only a few people knew. And Edward Sullivan was one of those few. The staff whispered that the two men had secrets between them, the type of secrets rich men bury with money and power. But Maria didn't believe rumors. She only saw two powerful men shaking hands in the doorway, pretending the world bowed to them. "Good morning, Judge Benton," Edward said, smiling stiffly. "Good morning, Edward," the judge replied. "Let's handle this quickly. I don't have much time." Maria didn't understand. She wasn't supposed to. But she sensed trouble the way birds sense storms. Maria was cleaning the main living room when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to see Edward and Judge Benton standing in the doorway, watching her with expressions she couldn't read. "Maria," Edward said softly, "we need to talk." Maria felt her stomach tighten. Edward never spoke to her directly unless it was something serious. "Yes, sir," she said politely. "Where were you last night between 8 p.m. and 10 p.m.? the judge asked suddenly, his voice firm. Maria blinked, confused. "I was cleaning the guest rooms, sir. You can ask Haley, the other maid. She was with me for some time." Judge Benton nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing. "Did you enter my study at any point?" Edward asked. "No, sir. I've never gone into your study unless you called me." Edward looked at the judge. The judge gave a slight nod. That was when everything changed. "Maria Dawson," Judge Benton said formally, "you are being accused of stealing $250,000 in cash from Mr. Sullivan's private study." Maria froze. Her broom fell to the floor with a soft echo on the marble. "What?" she whispered. "Sir, I would never." The money is missing, Edward cut in, voice cold. And the security logs show someone using a staff key after 9 p.m. Maria shook her head. My key never left my pocket. Do you have proof of that? The judge asked. Proof. Maria stuttered. I don't, how do I? Edward crossed his arms. Maria, you were the only staff inside that wing last night. That's not true, she said, her voice trembling. Haley went. Haley left at 8 p.m., Edward snapped. You stayed. Maria stepped back. Her breath grew tight. Her hands shook. She looked at Edward, a man she had served loyally. A man whose house she cleaned, whose son she cared about, whose trust she never broke. Sir, please, she begged softly. I didn't steal anything. I have never taken a single dollar that wasn't mine. Judge Benton's face hardened. Then how do you explain this? He asked. He lifted a small transparent evidence bag. Inside it was a stack of money, wrapped in a band with Edward Sullivan's company logo on it. Maria gasped. Her legs almost gave out. That money was found in her room. Or at least, that was what the judge wanted everyone to believe. She stared at the bag, her heart pounding inside her chest. That's not mine, she whispered. That was not in my room. Someone put it there. Do you hear yourself? Edward scoffed. Why would anyone do that? Maria looked straight into his eyes. And suddenly, she realized he didn't want her innocence. He wanted the accusation. He wanted her gone. Just as Judge Benton was about to call the officers waiting outside, footsteps echoed through the hallway. Noah appeared. His hair messy, his face pale, his eyes burning with disbelief. He looked at Maria, then at his father, then at the judge. What's happening? His voice cracked. No one answered. Instead, Judge Benton said, We are arresting Maria Dawson for theft. Noah stepped forward. No, he said sharply. No, you can't. Edward turned to his son. Go back upstairs. This doesn't concern you. It does concern me. Noah shouted. Maria didn't steal anything. She wouldn't do that. Edward glared at him. You don't know what you're talking about. But Noah wasn't backing down. He swallowed hard and said something that made the judge stiffen. Last night, I saw someone else enter your study. Everything went dead silent. Edward's face turned pale. Judge Benton's jaw tightened. Maria's eyes widened. Noah continued, voice trembling but determined. And it wasn't Maria. Judge Benton took a slow step toward the boy. Noah, he said, forcing a smile, this is a serious accusation. You must be mistaken. Noah shook his head. I know what I saw. Maria's tears slipped down her cheeks. For the first time that morning, she felt a small flicker of hope. Someone had seen the truth. But before Noah could say more, Edward grabbed him by the arm. Noah, go to your room. Now. No! Noah shouted, shaking free. I'm not lying. If you arrest her, you're arresting the wrong person. Judge Benton exchanged a quick look with Edward, a look full of silent communication. A look that said, we can't let him talk. And that was the moment Maria understood the truth. This wasn't about money. This wasn't about theft. This was about a secret. A secret so dark that two powerful men were willing to frame an innocent woman and silence a boy, just to keep it buried. Judge Benton raised his hand. Officers, he called. 2 officers entered immediately. Arrest her. Maria stepped back, tears burning her eyes. Noah screamed, stop. She didn't do anything. Dad, please. But Edward didn't look at him. He didn't look at Maria either. He simply stepped aside. Cold. Silent. Prepared. As the officers grabbed Maria's wrists, she whispered, voice shaking. Sir, please, why are you doing this? Edward didn't answer. Judge Benton did. For justice, he said. But the smile in his eyes told another story. And as Maria's hands were cuffed, as Noah cried out her name, as she was dragged out of the mansion she had served loyally, she made herself one promise. The truth will come out. It always does. What she didn't know was that the person who would expose it was the very boy crying behind her. Noah Sullivan. The one witness they underestimated. The one voice they tried to silence. The one truth they could never bury. The police car drove away from the mansion with Maria in the back seat, her wrists burning from the cuffs. She stared out the window, her face pressed against the cold glass, trying to understand how everything collapsed in a single morning. She kept replaying every moment in her mind, every step she took, every room she cleaned, every word she said. Nothing made sense. She had worked honestly every single day. She had no enemies. She owned nothing expensive. She barely owned more than 3 uniforms and a pair of shoes. Why would anyone pick her to blame? Inside the mansion, Noah stood frozen in the silence that followed the arrest. He watched the car disappear down the driveway, and something inside him cracked. Noah had always been the quiet boy, obedient, shy, almost invisible next to his powerful father. But today was different. Today he felt anger, fear, and a strange kind of courage rising like heat inside his chest. He turned to look at his father, who was adjusting his suit cuffs as if nothing had just happened. "You know she didn't do it," Noah said quietly. Edward didn't bother looking at him. "Enough. This matter is closed." "No," Noah replied, stepping forward, his voice growing stronger. "It's not. You're lying." Edward paused. Slowly, he lifted his eyes to his son. "Watch your mouth." Noah felt the tremor in his hands, but he didn't stop. "I saw someone go into your study last night. It wasn't Maria." Judge Benton, who had been pretending to type something on his phone, lifted his head sharply. His eyes landed on Noah with a warning buried in the stare. "You shouldn't accuse people without proof, young man." Noah swallowed hard. "I'm not accusing anyone. I'm telling the truth." Edward stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Go upstairs. Now." "Dad, listen. Now." Something in the tone made Noah step back. But as he turned away, he knew he couldn't let this go. That memory from last night didn't just flicker in his mind. It burned. He wasn't guessing. He hadn't imagined it. He had been walking to the kitchen when he saw a shadow slip into his father's study. A tall figure wearing a suit. Not a maid's uniform. Not Maria. And definitely not someone who belonged on that side of the house. The judge and his father exchanged a look, one Noah recognized. He had seen it many times in business meetings his father hosted at the house. It was the kind of look people used when a lie was shared between them. A lie they both agreed to protect. Noah walked up the stairs, fists tight at his sides. He didn't go to his room. Instead, he went into the library, the only place where he felt safe. He shut the door behind him and stood there, breathing heavily. His heart hammered with frustration, but also something he hadn't felt in a long time, determination. He didn't know how yet, but he was going to prove Maria was innocent. Somehow. Downstairs, Edward and Judge Benton sat in the study with the door closed. The judge locked it behind them, and Edward pulled out 2 glasses of whiskey, handing one to him. "That boy is getting in the way," Benton muttered. "He's just emotional," Edward replied, though his jaw was tight. "He's dangerous," the judge insisted. "He saw something." Edward frowned. "He's 16. No one will believe him over us." "You'd be surprised," Benton said, leaning back in his chair. "Teenagers talk. Teenagers make noise. And noise is the last thing you and I need." Edward sighed and rubbed his forehead, staring down at the papers scattered across his desk. Financial statements, contracts, bank transfers. The documents Judge Benton had forced him to sign weeks ago. Documents that covered a crime neither of them wanted revealed. If Noah exposed what he saw, the entire plan would collapse. The judge pointed his glass at Edward. "Control him. Before he becomes a problem." Edward didn't respond. But deep inside, he knew the judge was right. Meanwhile, as the afternoon dragged on, Maria sat alone in a small holding cell at the local police station. The walls were pale gray, the light flickering above her like the heartbeat of a dying room. Her hands trembled in her lap. She couldn't stop crying. Not loud sobs, just quiet tears that slid down without permission. Her whole life had been built on honesty. She grew up poor. Her mother had worked as a cleaner. Her father had fixed shoes. Maria's biggest dream was simply to live with dignity. That was why she worked so hard. She never wanted to be seen as a thief or a liar. And now she was being accused of stealing more money than she could even imagine. A female officer approached the bars. "You want water?" she asked gently. Maria nodded weakly. When the officer came back and handed her the cup, she whispered, "I didn't do it." The officer sighed. "You wouldn't be the first person to say that. But I'm telling the truth." The officer held her gaze for a moment, then walked away. It wasn't her job to believe or not believe. There were procedures, systems, paperwork. They followed the accusations, not the tears. Maria leaned back against the cold wall and shut her eyes. She remembered Noah's face as she was dragged out. The way he reached out. The way he screamed her name. For the first time since she arrived, she felt a tiny warmth inside her chest. Someone believed her. Someone saw her. That boy was her only hope. Back at the mansion, hours passed in heavy silence. The staff whispered in corners, wondering what had happened. Haley kept pacing through the hallways, biting her nails, repeating the same sentence to herself. She didn't do it. She didn't do it. She was the last person who saw Maria last night. She knew Maria never entered the study. But she also knew Edward hated when staff stepped into his business. Fear made her stay quiet. Upstairs in the library, Noah pulled out his tablet and opened the security access logs. He didn't know much about technology, but he knew enough to check timestamps. His heart rate spiked when he found something strange. The staff key logs had been altered. Someone had edited the entry. The time Maria supposedly used her key in the study was overwritten. But the most shocking part wasn't that. It was the timestamp Noah remembered clearly, the real time he saw someone slip into the study. 9:27 p.m. And the edited log also claimed Maria was in the study at 9:27 p.m., perfectly matching the moment Noah had been standing in the hallway. He closed his eyes. This wasn't just a mistake. It was intentional. Someone wanted Maria blamed. Someone with access to the system. Someone powerful. He needed proof, not suspicions. So he dug deeper, going through camera records. But half the cameras in that part of the house had been disabled earlier in the evening. Someone really didn't want to be seen. Noah's stomach twisted. There was only one person who could shut down cameras, edit logs, enter the study freely, and hide everything behind money and authority. Judge Benton. At that exact moment, footsteps approached the library. Noah quickly hid his tablet under a pillow and grabbed a random book from the shelf. The door opened, and his father stepped inside. Edward closed the door behind him quietly. "Noah, we need to talk." Noah didn't look up. "About what?" "About Maria. About what you think you saw." Noah clenched his jaw. "I don't think I saw anything. I know what I saw." Edward sat in the chair across from him. "Noah, I know this is confusing for you. But sometimes adults have to make difficult decisions. Framing someone isn't a decision, Dad." Edward's face hardened. "Watch your tone." Noah finally lifted his eyes. "Why are you lying?" Edward stared at him for a long moment. "Because some truths are too dangerous to come out." That moment told Noah everything. His father was hiding something far larger than a missing stack of money. And Maria was just a shield to protect it. He felt something cold creep into his chest. The father he admired growing up, the man he once believed was strong and righteous, had just revealed something dark. Noah stood up. "I'm going to help her." Edward's voice dropped to a chilling calm. "If you try to interfere, you will regret it." Noah didn't respond. He walked straight past him, refusing to meet his eyes. That night, long after everyone went to bed, he sneaked into the hallway again. He moved quietly, heart pounding, until he reached his father's study. The door was locked, but Noah knew where his father kept the spare key. He took a deep breath, inserted it, and slowly pushed the door open. The room was dark except for the faint glow of the city lights through the window. Papers were neatly stacked on the desk, but what caught Noah's attention was the drawer Edward always kept locked. It was slightly open. Inside was a leather folder. Noah reached for it with trembling hands. Inside that folder was the truth. The truth the judge and his father had been hiding. The reason Maria had been framed. The reason they were so desperate to silence him. And as Noah flipped through the documents, his breath caught in his throat. The real criminal wasn't Maria. It wasn't even just Judge Benton. It was his father. He stepped back, feeling the weight of betrayal crush his chest. His father had built everything on lies, on crimes, on manipulation. And now he was sending an innocent woman to prison to protect himself. Noah closed the folder and held it tightly. Maria had been framed because she was the easiest person to sacrifice. But Noah wasn't going to let it end that way. Not anymore. Not after what he saw. Not after what he finally understood. He quietly slipped out of the study, holding the folder close to his chest. For the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid of his father. He was afraid of what his father had become. And tomorrow, the fight to save Maria would begin. Noah barely slept that night. He sat on the edge of his bed, clutching the leather folder he had taken from his father's study. Every time he opened it, the pages hit him with the same heavy truth. His father and Judge Benton had been working together on financial schemes, illegal ones. Money laundering, bribes, forged signatures, hidden accounts, and worst of all, documents showing that the judge had used his power to bury cases in exchange for favors. One section of the folder was marked with a red tab. When Noah turned to that part, his stomach twisted. It was a contract with Judge Benton's signature at the bottom, agreeing to protect Edward from prosecution if anything ever surfaced. The deal included the judge's promise to eliminate liabilities. And apparently, Maria had become one of those liabilities. It wasn't because she stole anything. It was because she had cleaned the study too well. She had dusted the desk, moved some folders, and unknowingly touched papers the judge didn't want anyone to see. Even though she never opened anything, the tiny shift in the documents made the judge panic. If she had noticed anything out of place, she could have asked questions. And questions turned into risks. So instead of easing their own guilt, they turned her into a criminal. Noah pressed his hands against his face. He felt crushed, angry, and sick all at once. His father, the man he once believed was the model of strength, was nothing more than someone who hid behind power to protect himself. And Maria, who had done nothing but work honestly every single day, was locked in a cell suffering for a crime she never committed. Noah had reached a decision. He had to go to the police in the morning. He had to tell the truth. But dawn came faster than he expected. Before he could make a move, he heard loud voices in the hallway. Footsteps. Sharp and hurried. Noah quickly hid the folder under his bed and stepped out of his room. Edward was standing with two men in suits. They were security officers from the company, the kind his father only summoned when something serious happened. "Search the rooms," Edward said calmly. "All of them." Noah froze. They were looking for the folder. His father had realized it was gone. Noah panicked and stepped back into his room, closing the door quietly. He pressed his back against it, struggling to breathe. Every room? If they found the folder under his bed, everything would be over. They wouldn't hesitate. His father would say he stole confidential documents. He might even send him away somewhere, boarding school, treatment center, anything to silence him. Noah needed to act. He grabbed the folder and stuffed it into his backpack. He switched off his light and slid open his window. The sun was rising, painting the sky in soft orange light. Their mansion stood far from the road, but Noah didn't care. He took a deep breath and climbed out, dropping onto the bushes below with a soft thud. His arms scraped against a branch, leaving a long scratch, but he didn't stop. He ran across the garden, his breath sharp in the cold morning air. He reached the back gate, scaled the fence using a tree trunk, and jumped down to the path behind the property. He didn't look back. His father wouldn't expect him to run. Noah walked quickly until he reached the main road, then flagged down a passing taxi. When the driver rolled down the window, Noah said the first place that came to mind. "Police station," he whispered. The driver nodded and unlocked the door. Noah climbed in, heart pounding, clutching his backpack tightly to his chest. At the police station, Maria was sitting on her cell's bench, staring at the floor. She hadn't eaten. She hadn't spoken. She didn't feel safe. Every sound made her jump. She didn't have money for a lawyer, and she didn't have family nearby. She was alone. Until she heard a familiar voice shouting from the reception area. I need to talk to someone. It's about Maria Santos. Her heart stopped. Noah. She stood up and pressed her hands against the bars, listening carefully as footsteps approached. The officer walked to her cell. Someone's here to see you. Maria's eyes widened when Noah ran in with a backpack over his shoulder, breathing hard, eyes bright with determination. Noah? What are you doing here? She whispered. I'm getting you out, he replied, gripping the bars. I swear I am. I know who framed you. Before she could respond, a senior officer approached. Son, you can't be in here. This isn't a place for kids. Noah shook his head. I have evidence. The officer frowned. Evidence of what? That she's innocent, and that the judge who approved her arrest is corrupt. Everything went silent. The officer raised an eyebrow, ready to dismiss him, until Noah reached into his backpack. I have documents, he said. Real ones. Signed by Judge Benton and my father. The officer's expression shifted instantly. He gestured toward an interrogation room. Come with me. Now. Maria watched them walk away and felt a rush of hope so strong it brought tears to her eyes. Inside the room, Noah placed the folder on the table. The officer opened it and began reading slowly. His face tightened. His brows lowered. His breath grew heavier. When he reached the part with the forged signatures and bribe transfers, he stood up abruptly and left the room. Noah sat there alone, staring at the clock on the wall. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, a group of officers returned, including the deputy chief. They spread the documents across the table and examined every page. The deputy chief crossed his arms and looked at Noah with disbelief mixed with respect. This is serious, he said. It's the truth, Noah whispered. Please help her. The deputy nodded once. Wait here. They left again, this time with urgency. Maria's cell door opened 30 minutes later. She stood up, confused. You're free, the officer said gently. Maria stared at him. What? Charges have been dropped. You're going home. She stepped out slowly. Her knees felt weak. The officer guided her to the lobby, where she found Noah sitting on a bench, hugging his backpack tightly. When he saw her, he stood up. I told you I wouldn't let them do this, he said. She burst into tears, covering her face with her hands. It wasn't just relief. It was everything: fear, grief, humiliation, pain, gratitude, pouring out all at once. Noah stepped forward and hugged her gently. You believed me, she whispered. You're the only one who did. You deserved someone on your side, he replied softly. Outside the station, the morning light fell warm across the pavement. Officers escorted Maria and Noah to a police vehicle, not to arrest anyone, but to protect them. They were being taken to a safe location until the next steps could be taken. Because now the law had to do its job. Inside the mansion, chaos erupted when Edward learned Noah had escaped. He panicked for the first time in years. He called Judge Benton immediately, pacing across the study. He took the documents. All of them. Benton's voice dropped to a low growl. Where is he now? I don't know. He's not answering his phone. You let the 16-year-old destroy us? The judge snapped. You should have handled this sooner. Edward slammed his fist on the desk. Don't blame me. You're the one who insisted we keep those papers. Because I needed leverage. Benton shouted. Leverage? They're evidence now. Both men fell silent. If Noah was gone long enough to reach the police, their lives were over. The judge closed his eyes. We need to get ahead of this. How? Edward demanded. We clean up whatever we can. Destroy every file. Every account. Every signature. Edward swallowed hard. And the boy? The judge didn't answer. His silence was louder than words. But the police were already a step ahead. By noon, a warrant was signed. Officers arrived at the mansion with patrol cars and investigators. They were quiet at first, gentle even, but firm. This wasn't a request. It was law. Edward tried to stop them at the door, demanding to see the warrant, but when the officers handed it to him, the color drained from his face. They entered the study. They found evidence. They checked the computers. They accessed hidden accounts. Within an hour, everything began to crumble, everything Edward spent 20 years building. The judge received a call from the station ordering him to appear for questioning. He didn't show up. Instead, he tried to flee the city. But the police had already placed his license plate on alert. 2 hours later, he was stopped at a toll gate and escorted back in handcuffs. The corrupt judge's empire fell in a single afternoon. Maria was placed under police protection at a small safe house. She sat on a couch in shock while officers discussed legal procedures around her. Noah sat beside her, his arm resting lightly against hers, offering silent comfort. She finally turned to him. "Why did you help me? Your father is powerful. You could have looked away." Noah shook his head. "Power doesn't make someone right. And you've always been good to me. You believed in me even when my own father barely noticed I existed." Maria looked at him, eyes soft. "You're the bravest person I've ever met." Noah looked away shyly, a faint smile on his lips. Outside, the sun was setting, casting warm orange light through the window. The world was changing. Justice was beginning. And the truth, buried for so long, was finally rising to the surface. Edward Collins had always walked through life like a man untouchable. Judges shook his hand. Politicians invited him to private dinners. Business partners trusted every word he spoke. For years, he lived above consequences, above accountability, above the truth itself. But on this day, he stood behind the glass wall of an interrogation room, pale and trembling as investigators placed documents onto the table one after another. All the evidence he had hidden, buried, and protected for nearly a decade now lay exposed under bright white lights. He didn't speak. He couldn't. Every word he tried to form sat heavy and useless on his tongue. Across the table, the lead investigator tapped the final page. "Your own son brought this in. Everything matches the financial records. Judge Benton already confessed to your arrangement." Edward swallowed hard. For the first time in years, the world didn't bend to him. It boxed him in. He wasn't Edward Collins, the billionaire. He was just another man caught. Outside the station, reporters clustered near the entrance, cameras flashing, microphones raised, shouting questions at officers. News of the scandal spread faster than wildfire. Headlines appeared online within an hour. Billionaire under investigation for corruption tied to judge. Housekeeper wrongfully jailed in alleged cover-up. Teenage son exposes father's secret criminal deal. Inside the safe house, Maria sat quietly beside Noah as they watched clips of the news on a small television. She felt frozen, unable to process how her life had changed so quickly. One moment she was in a cold cell, fearing her future, and the next she was being called a victim of wrongdoing on national television. Noah turned the TV off gently. "You don't have to watch this." She shook her head. "It feels unreal. Everything. I never thought someone would believe me. I never thought I'd get out." "You didn't deserve any of it," Noah said softly. "And you were never alone." "Not really." Maria looked at him, her eyes full of tears she couldn't hide. "You're the only person who saw me as a human being. Everyone else just saw a maid." "You were more than that," he said quietly. "You were the only adult in that house who cared about me." An officer knocked on the door, stepping in with a careful smile. "Maria." "Noah. The deputy chief asked me to bring you both to the station. It's about the next steps." Noah stood up first. "Are we in any trouble?" "No," the officer assured him. "But everything is moving fast. It's time." Maria's stomach tightened with nerves. Time for what? When they arrived at the station, they were led to a private waiting room. Through the glass wall, they could see multiple officers guiding Edward down the hallway in handcuffs. Maria inhaled sharply. Edward noticed her through the glass. His steps faltered. Shame spread across his face, deep and consuming. For a moment, he looked like a broken man, someone stripped of every illusion of control. But Maria didn't feel triumph. She felt sadness. He had destroyed her life, yes. But seeing him like this didn't make her heart lighter. A few minutes later, the deputy chief entered the room with a folder in his hand. He sat across from Maria. "I think you deserve to hear this from us directly," he said gently. The case against you is officially closed. The judge's confession confirms you were framed, and the court has already filed paperwork to clear your record." Maria covered her mouth as her eyes filled with tears. Thank you so much." The deputy continued. "Additionally, the court is arranging compensation for the wrongful imprisonment you suffered." She blinked in shock. "Compensation?" "Yes," he said, nodding. "What happened to you was illegal. You will receive financial reparation, and a lawyer will help you with the next steps." Maria didn't know what to say. For the first time in a long time, she felt something soft bloom in her chest, something she had lost long ago. Then the deputy chief turned to Noah. "As for you," Noah tensed. "You showed extraordinary courage today," the deputy continued. "Most adults wouldn't have done what you did. You spoke up when the world was ready to stay silent." Noah looked away, suddenly shy. "I just did what was right." The deputy smiled. "That's exactly why your testimony will be key in court." "Will I have to speak in front of everyone?" Noah asked. "Yes," the deputy answered gently. "And I know that can be overwhelming. But the truth coming from your voice will make the difference." Maria smiled softly at him. "And you won't be alone. I'll be there." The hearing was scheduled 2 weeks later. The courthouse was packed. Reporters filled the sidewalks. Curious strangers gathered at the steps with cameras and microphones. Edward's fall from grace had become the biggest story of the year. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with whispers as people took their seats. Maria sat in the first row, wearing simple but neat clothes. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes stayed on the courtroom doors, waiting for Noah. When he entered, escorted by an officer, the room fell into a hush. The boy everyone had underestimated walked forward with quiet resilience. He took a seat at the witness stand. His hands shook as he adjusted the microphone. Edward was led in next, wrists bound, face heavy with shame. When he passed Noah, their eyes met for the briefest moment. For the first time in Noah's life, Edward didn't look powerful. He looked small. The judge overseeing the case began the session, reading the charges. The atmosphere was tense, every heartbeat echoing in the quiet room. When Noah was finally called to speak, he took a deep breath. He glanced at Maria. She gave him an encouraging nod. He looked at the judge. "My name is Noah Collins," he began, his voice steady but soft. "And I'm here because someone I care about was hurt. Someone innocent." Everyone listened. My father and Judge Benton worked together to cover up crimes. They used their power to trap people who couldn't fight back. Maria was one of them. Edward lowered his head. "I found the documents by accident," Noah continued. "I didn't know what they meant at first, but when I realized Maria was being taken away for something she didn't do, I couldn't stay quiet. I couldn't pretend everything was okay." His voice wavered. "I know people expect kids to stay out of adult issues, but what my father did wasn't an adult issue, it was a human issue. And if I stayed silent, I'd be just like him." A tear rolled down Maria's cheek. Noah inhaled shakily. "Maria was the only person who ever saw me. She listened. She cared. She didn't treat me like I was invisible. She didn't deserve what happened to her. No one does." He paused, eyes filling with emotion. "I'm here today because I believe in the truth. And I believe the truth should matter, even when it hurts." The courtroom remained silent for a long moment. The judge nodded solemnly and turned to the jury. Noah's testimony was added to the mountain of evidence already presented by investigators. After hours of reviewing the documents and confessions, the jury returned with the verdict. Edward Collins was found guilty on multiple charges: corruption, fraud, conspiracy, and abuse of power. Judge Benton faced an even harsher sentence. Maria watched quietly from her seat. The courtroom erupted with murmurs, but she remained still, processing everything with a mixture of relief and disbelief. When Edward was escorted out, he looked at Maria again, this time with regret in his eyes. He whispered something she couldn't hear. Maybe it was, "I'm sorry." Maybe it wasn't. But she didn't need his apology anymore. She looked at Noah instead. He walked toward her slowly, his expression soft and tired. When he reached her, she knelt down so their eyes were level. "You did it," she whispered. We did it, he corrected. She hugged him gently, her heart full. After the case ended, Maria received a formal apology from the court along with compensation. She was offered a position at a community center helping families who had gone through similar experiences. She accepted. Noah moved in with his aunt temporarily while social services reviewed his home situation. He visited Maria often. They shared quiet conversations, simple meals, and new beginnings. The days felt different now, lighter. No walls closing in. No secrets in the shadows. No silence forcing itself into their lives. Just a boy who found his voice. A woman who found her justice. And a truth that finally found daylight. The world kept moving forward, but neither of them would forget what they survived. Because some stories don't just end. They transform the people who lived them. And this one ended exactly the way it needed to. With truth. With freedom. And with a voice that refused to stay buried.